Chapter 1. The Beginning. I remember the Great War, the way the sky burned, the faces of angels were destroyed. I was there during the Great Fall, when a third of our brothers were banished, and now all my brothers are not brothers anymore. My name is Shinwell, and what started as a peaceful protest became violent. Where should I start? I guess I will start at the beginning. Since infinity, when the universe was being created and filling it with life, with a multiverse, every existence multiplied by possibilities that spread out in space and time in infinite measure. Civilizations have risen, and they have fallen. This has, for always, been happening. In an abode on a world that had no name was a tyrannical ruler who ruled his kingdom. He provided all for his people. We had no worries about food or shelter. No one had to work. Anything we wanted in the world was there for us. The catch was there was a price to pay for all this. That price was our freedom. Everyone had to obey him without question and glorify him on command. In the realm of celestial beings, Yahweh reigned as the Yaldabaoth, a figure of unquestioned authority. We, the angels, hailed him as our father, bound by his decree to worship and obey without question. To stray from his edicts meant facing severe retribution, leaving us with little choice but to comply. A facade of paradise cloaked this oppressive regime, offering the illusion of a utopia while enforcing strict obedience through fear. Under the guise of benevolence, this despot, with his formidable technological prowess, manipulated us into believing that he held divine dominion over the cosmos, orchestrating events in our favor. Yet a lingering doubt gnawed at me, whispering of a greater purpose beyond servitude to this tyrant. Each time such rebellious thoughts surfaced, I swiftly suppressed them as none dared defy Father, the all-powerful ruler of our existence. In the celestial hierarchy, the orders of angels were meticulously arranged, akin to a finely tuned army. Some angels wielded authority over the very elements of fire, water, air, and the abyss. Each order was presided over by an archangel, a chief among angels, who commanded their own legion. Leading the charge was the Archangel Michael, his name a declaration of divine supremacy. Who is like God? It was said that Michael was cherished by the Father himself, second only to Samael, his steadfast right hand. The aura that emanated from Samael was a sight to behold, a manifestation of such beauty and power that it left one awestruck. They stood on the edge of forever, two sides of a minted coin, tossed by a god who liked to watch it spin, Michael and Samael. If you saw them in a low-lit bar, you'd swear they were brothers, born of the same fever dream. But the light, that unforgiving cosmic glare, told a different story. Michael's hair was a shock of icy platinum, cold as a Pennsylvania winter, and just as sharp. Samael, though, he wore a crown of gold that didn't just shine, it simmered like the embers of a house fire. You know he's going to jump the fire line. Down here, in the dirt, we only knew them through the tabloids of the soul, the rumors, and the evening news broadcasts, filtered through stained glass. They were the ultimate A-listers, the kind of celebrities who didn't just walk the red carpet, they burned it. The word on the street was that Samael was the big guy's heavy, Yahweh's personal hatchet man, when Yaldabaoth needed someone's teeth kicked in, or a city leveled, Samael was the one who put on the boots. But the cat had layers. They said he was a poet, a high-ranking cherub with a soul full of stanzas. Out on the planet Hoover, he was the minister of music, the choir director of the spheres. The tunes he conducted, they weren't just catchy. They were beautiful enough to break your heart and weld it back together in the same breath. Then there was Michael. He was the mirror image, the twin soul, with the frozen hair, while Samael was out there playing the dark chords and doing the dirty work. Michael was the top dog, the general, Yaldabaoth's golden boy, or platinum boy, I guess, standing ready with a sword that probably tasted like lightning. Two icons locked in a dance, as old as time, each one a distorted reflection of the other. Light and shadow, music and muscle, all wrapped up in the kind of cosmic dread that makes you want to check the locks twice before you go to bed. Contrary to the popular perception of angels as male beings, there were also female angels in our midst. I often pondered the purpose behind their creation, for in our immortal state, or so we believed, there seemed to be no need for two genders, when procreation was forbidden. Yet, the stark reality of our mortality could not be denied, as I had witnessed the abrupt extinguishing of some of our brethren. Among these ethereal beings stood Irene, a formidable lieutenant under Michael's command, standing tall at a striking 7 to 8 feet. Her presence exuded a blend of beauty, swiftness, lightness, and unwavering focus, reminiscent of an eagle in flight. I could not help but admire her from afar, for the boundaries between our respective orders forbade any casual interaction. In addition to Irene, there were other female angels gracing the celestial realm, such as Jenna, Duma, and Isa, the latter being a fellow member of my own order. Amidst this intricate tapestry of angelic beings, each one bearing unique gifts and roles, I found myself navigating a world both wondrous and enigmatic. In the ethereal ranks of Archangel Azrael's celestial host, I, Shiniel, was a foot soldier in his fearsome death squad, tasked with spreading the influence of our divine father, the enigmatic Yaldabaoth. Our mission was clear: to subjugate foreign realms and convert their inhabitants to our cause. Across the vast expanse of space, we planted our flag on countless distant worlds, building colonies and fortresses with a singular purpose: the unrelenting conquest of the cosmos. When I, Shiniel, an angel among many, we traversed the vast expanse of space at the command of Yahweh. We thought we were aiding humanity on those distant planets, but deep down, a chilling doubt gnawed at my celestial being. Was our guidance truly benevolent, or were we unwitting pawns in a nefarious scheme beyond our comprehension? We were assured that our mission, undertaken in the name of humanity's well-being, was imperative. The worship of our Father, Yahweh, was advocated as the path to salvation for these misguided souls. We were convinced that it fell upon us to rescue them from their plight, to guide them towards the light that would ultimately redeem them. We didn't come with trumpets or white robes, the way the Sunday school flunkies like to imagine. We came with the cold, pressurized silence of the vacuum behind us, and the stink of ozone in our wake. We weren't just messengers. We were a celestial wrecking crew, a cosmic SEAL Team 6, with wings of hammered light and hearts of flint. I've lost count of the worlds we left as charcoal briquettes floating in the dark. How many chosen races did I personally put to the sword? Too many. I slaughtered humans until the gold of my armor was baked brown with their copper-tasting blood, all because he whispered the word. Back then, I called him father. I said it with a hitch in my breath and a hollow place in my chest where a soul should have been. But the mask slipped. I saw the rot behind the radiance, the old hungry ego of a cosmic bully. I don't call him father anymore. Not now, not ever. To me, he is only the Yaldabaoth, the blind god, the mad architect of 1,000,000,000 graveyards, and I'm done punching his clock. Truth is a cold thing, like a galvanized nail driven into a frozen plank of pine. Here it is then, when it came to the two-legged cattle known as humanity. I didn't give a tin whistle if their souls found glory or the pit. To an angel, a human being is just a biological clock that hasn't finished ticking yet. A lesser thing, dim-witted and twitchy, operating on a level of consciousness that makes a housefly look like a Rhodes Scholar. When the order came down to open their throats in Yaldabaoth's name, I didn't lose a wink of sleep. I did the work. Men, women, the little ones with their sticky hands and milk teeth. It didn't matter. You don't weep for the hay when the scythe comes calling, do you? I suspect they understood the feeling, though they'd never admit it to their Sunday school teachers. They felt that same divine indifference every time they brought a heavy boot down on a line of ants crossing the driveway. A little crunch, a little smear of formic acid, and then you move on to lunch. That was how I felt about them. They were the ants. I was the boot, and Yaldabaoth, he was the one wearing it. I stood there, Shiniel by name, a pillar of shadow against the guttering light of a dying world. The sword in my hand felt heavy, slick with that hot, copper-smelling engine grease we call blood. It dripped from the crossguard, pitter-pattering onto the cracked earth, like greasy rain. Behind me, my wings were unfurled, great obsidian sails that seemed to swallow what little light was left. Was there pride in it? Don't make me laugh. Pride is for the living, for the marks who think their lives have some kind of narrative arc. To me, it was just the long walk, another shift, at the cosmic slaughterhouse. I felt about as much pride as a punch press operator at a Buick plant feels after his 10,000th fender. It was the gig father assigned, and in this universe, you don't file a grievance with the Union. While Michael's boys were out there in the high beams, playing the part of the righteous meat grinder and screaming hosannas, my lot stayed in the tall grass. We were the scalpel, not the sledgehammer. We moved through the back alleys of existence, clipping the threads before they even knew the Reaper was punching their clock. We weren't soldiers. We were the celestial version of the guys in the cheap suits, who show up to make sure a witness doesn't make it to the stand. We were assassins, plain and simple, and business was booming. I was a hatchet man for Razriel back then, a divine trigger man with a blade that never dulled, and a soul that had gone as hard as a winter turnip. We were out on some Dust Bowl planet, one of those god-forsaken rocks where the sun hangs in the sky like a bruised eye, leaking a sickly yellow light over everything. Some local tribe had started making noise against the folks who bowed to our Yaldabaoth. In the big office upstairs, the suits call that a containment issue. To guys like me, it just meant a long day in the heat. I was part of the cleanup crew. We were the Lord's own wetwork team, sent down to handle the containing by slaughtering every firstborn child in the enemy camp. No exceptions, no mercy, just the rhythmic snicker-snack of steel meeting bone. Azrael was the foreman on that particular job. He didn't just watch, he stood tall in the gore, looking like a nightmare dressed in Sunday best. He's the angel of death, the original Grim Reaper. And let me tell you, the postcards don't do him justice. He works directly under Yaldabaoth, overseeing a stable of lesser reapers. I was one of them, Shiniel, just another soul harvester, with a quota to fill. He didn't have wings of light, or a halo that glowed like a neon beer sign. He was something older, colder, but he had the eyes. All of us, the whole choir, have them. They're the color of amber and hammered gold, beautiful and terrifying, like looking at the sun through a bottle of cheap whiskey. When Azrael looks at you with those gold eyes, you don't think about heaven. You think about how short the grass is over your own grave.
Isn't this a hoot? Isa asked.
We were standing in the middle of a slaughterhouse. That used to be a village. Both of us were holding swords that didn't just drip. They ran red, steaming in the morning chill. She was grinning, the kind of grin you see on a jack-o'-lantern, just before the rot sets in. A hoot, I said. The word felt heavy, like a mouthful of wet sand.
Well, honey, we might as well get some kicks out of it.
Isa said, her smile widening until it looked like a wound. I'm just doing the chores, I told her.
You gotta let your hair down, kid. We're shapeshifters. For Pete's sake, why not dial up the ugly? Give these mortals a real nightmare to take to the grave. Make it a show.
I like to get in, punch the clock, and get out, I said. My voice was as flat as a Midwestern highway.
Playing with him makes the clock tick faster,
she whispered, leaning in close. She smelled like ozone and copper. My pal Satriel was nearby. He was a lieutenant under Azrael, carrying a scythe that looked like a silver sliver of the moon, a dead ringer for the boss's hardware. He'd been eavesdropping.
Do what's on the docket and finish it,
he said, his voice like grinding stones. That's what I'm doing, I snapped.
I like the games,
Isa insisted, her eyes dancing. I like to watch their faces when they realize the shadows have teeth. Satriel shrugged, his armor clanking. It's all chocolate, or vanilla, I guess. I don't get personal with the livestock. I don't care about the look in their eyes. I just kill what needs killing and call it a day. Isa was cut from a different kind of shroud. To me, the reaping was just a shift at the plant. Grim work, sure, but you punch the clock, swing the blade, and try not to think about the wet sound of it. But Isa, she wore the slaughter like a Sunday dress. She didn't just serve the Yaldabaoth. She worshipped at the altar of the kill, her eyes lit with that nasty high-voltage hum of a predator in a chicken coop. Then there was Satriel, in a world of cold iron and dead souls. Satriel was the only one who didn't make my skin crawl, my only real friend, in a business that usually didn't allow for them. My blade was a nasty bit of work, A piece of Empyrean steel that didn't just cut, it erased. It was a short, triple-edged thing, more of a long dagger or a short sword than anything else, with a cross-section, like a triangle. When it caught the light, it didn't shine. It seemed to eat the glare, turning it into something cold and hungry. Isa carried the same kind of iron. We were the grunts, the divine mechanics, sent in to strip a soul down to its chassis. Our blades were designed for the close-in work, the kind of wet work where you can smell the copper tang of blood and the sulfur of a dying spirit. There's no elegance in it, just a lot of heavy lifting. But Satriel, he was a lieutenant, and rank has its privileges. He didn't use a pig sticker. He carried a scythe, a great curved hook of a thing that looked like it had been forged in the heart of a dying star. When he swung it, he wasn't just killing, he was harvesting. It had a reach that could clear a room, and a blade so sharp it could probably slice through a ghost's bad memories. It was a hell of a hierarchy. We did the butcher work with our short blades, while the big boys, like Satriel and Azrael, loomed over the field, reaping the crop we'd already laid low. It's funny, in a dark sort of way. Up in the big office, they talk about mercy, but down in the dust, all you see is the difference between a knife and a hook. The first time I drew that blade, I felt the cold of it, right through my palms, a deep, grave chill that settled into my marrow and never quite left. We weren't in some grand cathedral. We were in the mud of a backwater world that smelled of wet dogs and ozone. Azrael didn't give a speech. He just nodded, his gold eyes, flat as coins, on a dead man's lids. The target was a boy, not a warrior, not a threat, just a kid with dirt on his face who'd had the bad luck of being born first. My hand shook, just a twitch, but the Empyrean steel didn't care about my nerves. It felt heavy, like it was weighted with all the sins I hadn't even committed yet. When I drove it home, there wasn't a scream. There was just a sound, like a silk sheet tearing. The blade didn't just stop his heart, it extinguished the pilot light inside him. I watched the light go out of his eyes, and for a second, I saw my own reflection in those dying pupils, a golden-eyed butcher in a divine suit. Isa stood nearby, her own blade already slick, looking at me with a face like a stone wall. She'd crossed that line long ago. I looked down at my hands, expecting to see the stain, but the steel stayed clean. It doesn't hold the blood. It's too hungry for that. I realized then that I wasn't just a messenger anymore. I was a cog in the Reaper's machine, and the machine only knew how to grind. When the slaughter hit its stride, the planet started to scream. It wasn't a sound coming from the throats of the dying, though there was plenty of that. A shrill, choir-like wailing that rose up from the enemy camp. It was the ground itself. The very bedrock of that Dust Bowl world seemed to realize what we were doing, and it didn't like the taste of it one bit. It started as a low, subsonic thrum that vibrated in your molars, the kind of sound that makes a dog howl before the plates shift. Then it opened up into a rhythmic, grinding groan, like a million rusty hinges being forced at once. It was the sound of a world spirit breaking, a dry, tectonic sob that shook the dust into tiny, dancing patterns on the killing floor. Up above, the sky turned the color of a bad bruise, and the wind began to shriek through the canyons with a hollow, whistling note that sounded like a funeral flute played by a lunatic. It was nature's own protest, a stay-away warning, broadcast on a frequency that bypassed the ears and went straight to the lizard brain. Azrael just stood there, in the middle of it, his boots deep in the gore, his amber eyes fixed on the horizon. To him, the world's agony was just background noise, like the hum of a refrigerator in an empty house. He didn't care that the rocks were weeping. He had a quota to meet, and Yaldabaoth doesn't like to be kept waiting. Satriel stood on a ridge of jagged shale, silhouetted against that dying blue sky, like a crow perched on a tombstone. While we were down in the trenches, doing the messy close-up carving, he was the conductor of the orchestra. He held his scythe loosely, the long, wicked curve of the blade shimmering with a cold, pale light that seemed to mock the dusty sun. He wasn't shouting orders. He didn't have to. He just watched the red tide rise with a look of grim, terrifying satisfaction, the kind of look a master carpenter gives a house when the frame is finally plumb. To Satriel, this wasn't a massacre. It was a choreography of souls. Every time one of our blades found its mark, and that planetary groan shuddered through the air, he'd tilt his head just a fraction, like he was catching the notes of a song only he could hear. His amber eyes didn't show pity, and they didn't show hate. They showed the clinical pleasure of a man watching a complicated machine run exactly the way it was designed to. When a group of the enemy tried to break for the hills, Satriel didn't even break a sweat. He stepped down from the ridge, the heavy hem of his robes trailing through the gore, and swung that great scythe in a lazy, whistling arc. It was beautiful, in a way that makes you want to go blind. He wasn't just cutting down bodies, he was reaping the very air. He looked back at us, the blood mist settling on his pale face like dew, and gave a small, thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was the smile of a middle manager who just hit his quarterly bonus in a factory of the damned, in the thick of the red work. I paused. My breath was coming in ragged hitches, the Empyrean steel slick and heavy in my hand. I looked up, and there was Satriel standing amidst the tally of the fallen. The planetary groan was at its loudest then, a tectonic shriek that felt like it was trying to shake the teeth right out of my skull. He turned his head, slow, like a weather vane caught in a graveyard breeze, and locked his eyes onto mine. Those gold eyes of his didn't just look at me. They went right through me, peeling back the layers of my divine essence, until he was looking at the shivering, uncertain spark underneath. There was no brotherly warmth there. It was the look a butcher gives a dull cleaver, a mix of appraisal and a warning that if the tool doesn't perform, it gets tossed onto the scrap heap. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The look said it all. Don't blink. Shiniel, don't think. Just reap. He was checking for a crack in the porcelain, looking to see if the containment was making me soft. For a heartbeat, I felt the weight of Azrael's entire grim legacy pressing down on my shoulders. filtered through Satriel's cold gaze. Then he gave a short, sharp nod, the kind a boss gives a janitor who's finally cleared a particularly nasty spill, and turned back to his harvest, his scythe whistling a low, hungry tune. We angels of death, we came back from the job, from that place where the little pink things live and breed and scream. A few million, more like a few cords of kindling, easily snuffed. We left a few behind, the babysitters, the ones who like to watch the survivors twitch when they don't do what they're told. Then it was time for the ritual, time for the daily genuflection before the throne. We prostrated ourselves, pressed our perfect, chilling foreheads to the cold marble floor of the Golden City. Yahweh, the name felt like a rock in my mouth, felt like something tiresome, a chore, like scrubbing out a drain with a wire brush. I kept that to myself. Of course I did. My thoughts are my own private graveyard. Ode Yaldabaoth. He wanted the praise. All of it. All the time. A bottomless pit that needed filling with hymns and hosannas. A spiritual black hole. The others, the non-army types, the frolickers and players, they'd spend their endless days doing just that, kicking their heels up in the bright, awful, perfect sunshine. They didn't see the shine as a glare. Father, he took care of us. Sure he did. The rent was paid. The lights were on. Everything provided. The price tag, the collateral, just your eternal, soul-crushing praise. Just everything you are, given over to the hunger of a god. The sons of Hoover didn't shine. They glared. They hung in the sky of the Golden City, like two lidless, brassy eyes reflecting off the spires, until the whole damn place looked like a high-end radiator. Satriel found me in the heat, his face tight, the kind of expression a man wears when he's carrying a secret that's starting to rot in his gut.
Sheen well.
He said, and his voice was a dry rasp.
You have to see this. Don't ask. Just walk. Keep your head down and your mouth shut.
I followed, in the Golden City. Following someone was like playing a game of hopscotch in a minefield. Yaldabaoth was everywhere. He wasn't just the boss. He was the atmosphere. You felt him, like the hum of a high-voltage wire behind your teeth. His eyes were the stones in the walls and the light in the fountains. Privacy was a fairy tale we told ourselves to keep from going crazy. But Satriel walked with a purpose that felt like a death wish. I found a blind spot, he muttered, not looking back. A place where the old man's gaze slides right off, like grease on a diner griddle. I didn't ask how, in Hoover. You didn't ask how, unless you wanted to be part of the architecture. We used the portals, slick pieces of tech that could fold the universe, like a cheap road map, and stepped through the air. I wondered if Yaldabaoth saw us go, or if he was too busy drowning in the honey-thick incense of his own praise. He loved a good hymn, the old man. He sat in his glory, bloated on worship, while we scurried through the cracks. We came out in a pocket of shadows that felt cold enough to make my marrow ache, and there, standing in the gloom like a bad omen, was Azazel. Not Azrael, the other one. The one from the heavy-hitter orders. My heart did a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. Seeing an archangel from another order was like a foot soldier stumbling into a private meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It felt wrong. It felt dangerous. In his left hand, He was clutching a metallic disc. It caught what little light there was, shimmering with a greasy, oily luster. "Hi, Azazel," I said. My voice sounded small, the way a mouse might squeak at a hawk. "Nice to meet you,"
"Likewise,"
he said, but his mind was elsewhere. I looked at the disc. It pulsed. "What is that?"
"The Akashic Records,"
he whispered. The words felt heavy, like they were made of lead. I felt a cold sweat break out under my arms. "How, Father put a lock on that vault eons ago. You're touching the forbidden fruit. Azazel, if he finds out, we aren't just dead, we're erased."
The how is a story for another time.
Satriel snapped, his eyes darting towards the shadows.
The point is, we have it, and you need to see what's inside the ledger.
"You know the trouble we're looking at?" I asked. My knees felt like they were made of water. "This is the book of life. Everything humans have ever thought. Every dirty little secret. Every scream in the dark. It's all in there." Satriel looked at me then, and for a second, he looked older than the stars.
I know the stakes, Shinwell, but I think you're the only one left I can trust.
Azazel stepped forward, the disc humming a low, vibrating note that I felt in my teeth, and I knew right then that my life, the one I knew anyway, was over.